This is my ranking of games like Bloodborne that I've played, based purely on my personal experience. Each game is placed from masterpiece down to trash, depending on how impactful the combat feels, how strong the world and atmosphere are, and how well they kept me engaged from start to finish. Let's get straight into the list. Code Vein starts with a strong anime style that makes it stand out right away, but as I kept playing, it felt closer to a familiar Souls-like with a few changes. The combat is slow and careful, where timing and positioning matter a lot, but the blood code system gave me freedom to switch builds anytime. I liked changing abilities and weapons depending on the enemy, especially during harder fights where one setup didn't work. The AI partner helped in normal fights and made exploration easier, but during boss battles it sometimes felt unreliable and added frustration. The story kept me interested with its mystery, even if the pacing slowed things down at times. It experiments in a few areas, not all of them work, but it still holds up well. This lands in the great tier. Dishonored begins by giving me full control over how I want to play, and that freedom stayed strong. Every mission felt like a sandbox where I could choose stealth, combat, or something in between, and the game always supported that choice. I spent a lot of time exploring different paths, finding hidden routes, and experimenting with powers like teleporting across rooftops or sneaking past guards without being seen. The world felt dark and detailed, with its plague setting and political story slowly unfolding as I moved forward. I also liked how my actions changed the world, making each decision feel meaningful in small ways. Some parts of the story didn't fully come together, but the gameplay carried the experience the whole way. This easily earns its place in the excellent tier. Lies of P starts by feeling very close to Bloodborne, but as I kept playing, it proved itself with strong combat and a unique identity. The combat is fast and aggressive, with a big focus on perfect timing, and I had to really learn enemy patterns to survive tougher fights. I liked the weapon system a lot, especially being able to mix different parts and create new combinations that changed how I approached combat. The world of Krat felt dark and memorable, and the story kept me engaged more than most games in this genre, with clear characters and a steady flow of events. Boss fights stood out the most, even with some difficulty spikes that felt a bit uneven. It doesn't change the formula much, but everything it does is polished and satisfying. This one stands tall in the masterpiece tier. Salt and Sanctuary plays as a direct 2D take on Dark Souls, but as I spent more time with it, it showed its own identity through its design and systems. The combat keeps that familiar rhythm of dodging, blocking, and learning enemy patterns, and it works well even in a side-scrolling format. I liked exploring its interconnected world, filled with shortcuts and hidden paths, though it sometimes became confusing to navigate later on. The skill tree gave me a lot of ways to shape my build, even if it didn't always feel smooth when switching styles. Boss fights were challenging and required focus, but never felt unfair. The dark art style and atmosphere added a strong tone to the whole experience. It borrows a lot, but it understands what makes it work. This earns a strong place in the excellent tier. Nioh 3 brings a big shift to the series with its open areas, but what kept me hooked the most was how deep and fast the combat feels. Switching between samurai and ninja styles gave me two very different ways to approach fights. Some fights rewarded careful timing and defense, while others worked better with constant pressure and speed. The combat system has a lot going on, but once it clicks, it becomes very satisfying to master. Exploration felt more rewarding this time, even if the world design didn't always stand out. The story wasn't very engaging, but it never got in the way of the gameplay. It does a lot right, even with a few rough spots. This finds its place in the great tier. Blasphemous I and II build a dark and disturbing world that stayed in my mind long after I stopped playing, mainly because of how unique the art and atmosphere are. The combat focuses on timing, dodging, and learning enemy patterns. And while the first game can get repetitive over time, it still delivers satisfying moments, especially during boss fights. The sequel improves things by adding more weapons, better movement, and more variety in how I approach different areas, which made the experience feel more engaging throughout. I also liked how both games keep their mysterious storytelling style, even if it can be hard to fully understand at times. Exploration, visuals, and sound design carry a lot of the experience here. It may not reinvent the formula, but it refines it well. This earns its spot in the excellent tier. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice takes a very different approach compared to other Souls-like games, and it made me completely change how I play. Instead of relying on builds or grinding, everything comes down to skill, timing, and learning enemy patterns. The combat is built around deflecting attacks and breaking posture, and once I understood that rhythm, every fight became intense and rewarding. Movement also plays a big role, with the grappling hook letting me explore vertically and approach fights in smarter ways. Stealth options helped in many situations, but the real highlight was mastering sword combat during boss fights. The game stays focused on its mechanics and doesn't distract with unnecessary systems. The story is more direct, but the world and atmosphere still carry that mystery. It demands patience, but it gives back a lot once learned. This stands at the masterpiece tier. Thymesia opens with fast and aggressive combat that feels very different from slower Souls-like games. There's no stamina to manage, so fights are more about constant pressure, quick dodges, and well-timed parries. I liked how the dual health system works, where I had to mix normal attacks with claw strikes to deal real damage, as it added a bit of strategy to every encounter. The combat stays fun throughout, especially in boss fights where timing really matters. Outside of that, the world and story didn't leave much of an impact, and many areas felt too similar and lacked a strong identity. Exploration wasn't very exciting either, except for a few standout locations. It does a few things really well, but doesn't stay memorable in the long run. This ends up in the good tier. Dark Souls 3 delivers a complete Souls-like experience that builds on everything that came before it and refines it strongly. The combat is faster and more aggressive, and I had to stay alert in every fight, especially with enemies that attack in groups or use different abilities. I liked how weapon arts added more variety, giving each weapon its own style and making combat more dynamic. The world design stood out a lot with interconnected areas, hidden paths, and constant rewards for exploring every corner. Boss fights were a major highlight, with many memorable encounters that tested my timing and patience. Even when some fights felt uneven, the overall journey stayed engaging. It brings together challenge, atmosphere, and depth in a way that keeps me coming back. This stands among the masterpiece tier. Witchfire goes for a mix of fast shooting and roguelike structure, and while the core gameplay feels polished, it didn't fully keep me engaged over time. The gunplay and magic abilities feel strong, with each weapon and spell having impact, and I liked experimenting with different builds during runs. The progression system also adds a twist where the game becomes harder as I level up, which kept things tense but sometimes felt a bit too punishing. Each run gives freedom to choose objectives, whether it's fighting enemies, collecting resources, or going after bosses. The problem is that the world and mission areas start to feel repetitive, and there isn't enough variety yet to keep things fresh for long. It shows potential, but it still feels incomplete in its current state. This sits in the mediocre tier. That wraps up my ranking of games like Bloodborne. From unforgettable highs to a few weaker entries, this list reflects what stayed engaging and worth playing all the way through. Feel free to share your own rankings below and let me know if there are any other similar games I should check out next. Thanks for watching.